Today I just wanted to share a little bit about my story in applying Princeton and applying in general, and then some advice that might be helpful that I wish I knew. I specifically want to talk about transforming your application from something on a page, from just like numbers and words, into something as a person, like the person behind your application. How can you start to convey that? I'll start with a story of two applicants. One applicant on the left, student one. This student is pretty accomplished, went to a good high school, got all A's, took some AP classes, got maybe 15-30 on her SAT, did some computer science stuff, did some volunteering, and now she's applying to MIT. But when I tell you that, it sounds kind of basic, kind of boring. It sounds like everyone can check off those check boxes, right? So that's kind of like the checkbox student. What about student two? Student two, same high school, but she really has a passion for computer science, and not just that, but actually spreading it to other friends. Going to camps where she teaches middle school students, and especially middle school girls, how to start coding, how to get involved, and then she spends her time going into the local refurbishing computers and helps people who don't have computers gain access to computers. So that's part of her vision, part of her mission, because she's so passionate about it and she wants to spread it to other people. And so you can see in her essays, like that's what she talks about. Kind of an interesting person, and think about both people that are the same person, but two very different perceptions. Does that kind of make sense? That you start to see, instead of just a page and checkboxes, you start to see the actual person behind it. So the question is, well, how do we get our application to be like that? How do we get the person to pop out so we can be more memorable? This is the profile pyramid. The profile as in you, the applicant profile. And on this left, we have an axis of distinctiveness. As you go higher up the axis, the more distinctive you are, the more you stand out in your application. So we start with academic, okay? Academic is the base level. Everyone here probably is a great student, has great SAT scores. And that's kind of like the checkbox that you need, right? And it's low distinctive because a lot of people can do well in school and a lot of people can get good test scores. So kind of low on the distinctive and kind of low on your control as well, because you can't really control what classes your school offers, and you can't really have as much personality in what you take. Like it's just sort of classes and lists and names and not really much to that. So then what about the next thing? Extracurriculars. Here we start to get a little bit more personality, because this is what you decide to do with your time. And that's, I mean, time is so precious. So if you're spending your time doing something, that's pretty cool. And it tells you a little bit more about yourself, right? Or you can show a little bit about yourself to other people. So then you're getting a little bit higher distinctiveness, a little bit higher uniqueness, because you have a bit more control over what you're doing there. And finally, character. This, okay, I call it character, but it's not what you think of like as virtue and that sort of thing. It's more like, who are you as a person, your personality, your character, how do you pop out of a page? And that's in your essays, in your letters of recommendation, in your interview. That's the highest distinctiveness, because here you really get to stand out and tell your story. And so we're going to focus the most time on character because it's the most important, and then the least time on academics, because it is important. Yes, schools want good students, but it's not something that you can really distinguish yourself. Another thing of note, as you go from academics to extracurriculars to character, you become a little bit more pointy, right? So you guys have heard of the word like well-rounded. Like you do a little bit of everything, like some English classes, some math classes, some science classes, and you can have a well-rounded education, a solid base. And then as you go up in that pyramid, as you go into activities you do, and especially the essays you write, you become a little bit more distinguished, a little bit more excelling in one field, and that's sort of what you want to do. Well-rounded person, that's sort of like the base here. Well-rounded education, academics, and then who's someone that's pointy? I think of Michael Phelps, because he's probably like the best swimmer that we've seen, very pointy person. So the goal is to move from well-rounded education to be able to show a couple points in your application. And why do we do that? It's so that when someone's reading your application, they can remember you by those couple of points. Like something very memorable and something very cool. So that's the goal of moving from base to top, and it goes higher in importance, higher in distinctiveness, higher in control, and also higher in pointiness. So let's start with academics. This is again the most boring section because everyone probably has great academics, and it's kind You guys already do this really well. So, of academics, the most basic thing is standardized testing. Everyone does it, kind of boring. You guys have all probably studied the SAT. There's not much to say here except you don't have to get a perfect score. You can just sort of like a checkline, a baseline. If you get maybe like a decent score, you can check that box off and focus on other things. Okay, now coursework. Here's a little bit more interesting because you have some choice of what you want to take. 3 questions that college applications might look for in your coursework. First, did you challenge yourself? Did you take advantage of the opportunities that your school has? And I'm sure you guys go to really great schools, so I'm sure you have a lot of opportunities to take good classes. So did you try to make an effort to push yourself there? Second thing, did you excel? Yeah, that could mean did you get A's, but did you apply yourself in your school and did you work hard? And third, did you improve over your time? So if you didn't get so good grades, did they improve over the 4 years? Did they get better? And if you've been getting A's across the board, did your classwork improve? Like, did your classwork get harder? So that means, even though you're still doing this as well, your classwork is getting harder, so that's you're becoming a better student, you're learning, you're growing. So these are 3 factors to consider when taking courses and find yourself in school. But I'm sure you guys already satisfy all these 3 things. So again, won't spend too much time on academics. Let's move to something a little bit more interesting, extracurriculars. What do you spend your time outside of class doing, right? This you have a little bit more control over, which is exciting. I was doing this scholarship weekend at UNC, it's the Moorhead King Scholarship. And I was feeling really good about it. I really loved UNC. I met a lot of the people there. I was doing some of the interviews. I was feeling really confident. And then I went to this group interview. So far, it's so good. And then this person asked me, like, what is your legacy? And I was like, what? So I said, like, I helped this teacher with this, like, one thing, and I don't know, I think she was happy from that, and I sort of butchered my way through it, and obviously I did not get the scholarship. Cost $100,000, that's why this question is important. But I did that interview in maybe October, November, and that really helped me reframe when I was applying for other colleges, this idea of a legacy. And what do I mean by that? How has the school changed because you were there? If that's something you can convey in your application, that's great. Through your extracurriculars, through your essays, that's amazing. That's what we want, right? But it doesn't have to be like, oh, like, because I met some people at Moorhead who went and established nonprofits in India to like educate girls there and like flew all the time and did all that. And I was like, wow, that's really big legacy. But it can be small legacy, like, oh, I met this one student in my volunteering and I really spent 2 hours a week with him. And through that, he wanted to apply to college. He wanted to grow and major in computer science or something, or do something that he didn't want to do before. That's also a legacy. And it's a smaller thing. It doesn't have to be establishing a huge nonprofit in another country. It can be something like spending time with one person in an activity that really made an impact. And then you got to describe that impact, right? So keep this question in mind. What is your legacy when you're thinking about framing your extracurriculars and framing your impact on your school? So 2 things that colleges might look for in extracurriculars. First is commitment, and then second is leadership. So I'll first go over commitment. What does commitment mean? So do you care about your activity? Do you really believe in it? If it's volunteering, do you want to devote yourself to it? Or if it's a sport, do you really are interested in the sport? And you don't have to say that, like, oh, I love basketball in my essay, right? But you can, it will show in the time that you spend on it, because you have to list like hours per week you spend on it, like things you did, and activity on your column now. Second question, do you develop through it? But let's say you're on the tennis team, right? And you first year you start out just a member, maybe like C5 on a team of 6. And then you slowly get better at tennis, so you move up, C4 maybe, and then you start losing less, that's great. And then maybe eventually you become captain. It's like, did you have personal growth through this activity? And that's something to think about when you're applying yourself in these activities. How can I continue to grow myself? And not just for the case of showing colleges that I grew, but actually just personally wanting to grow and to develop. Because hopefully it is something you care about, so you want to be better at it, right? And finally, do you dedicate yourself to it? So, as I said, the Common App does look at activities, and they look at how much time you spend on it, how much time per week, how many hours per year, and how many years you did it in your 4 years of high school. So if you can show that you really committed to it, starting from freshman year and going all the way to senior year, that's also really great. Okay, so that's commitment. And next, leadership. So do you take initiative? Do you want to start projects? If you see something that needs to be changed in whatever you're doing, are you going to be the one to step up and do it? starting that nonprofit. But it can be something as small as like, yeah, I really just took an hour of my day once per week to spend time with someone who I felt like needed that time more than I did. And finally, what is your impact? This is kind of related to the question of what is your legacy? How did that school or that environment, that community change because you were there? And what specific things can you think about that illustrate that? Communicating impact. When you write down your activities, it's kind of brief, right? So you're going to have to illustrate that impact that I've been talking about. And it's kind of hard to do. You have a very specific word limit, so it's hard to do in a few words. But here's just a quick example of how you might go about doing it. So you first got the title. This is one way to communicate that you've done, right? I was an organizer and counselor of a STEM summer camp. Okay, that tells you something, right? But it doesn't tell you a lot. So what's another way we can communicate that? By communicating a difference. So I raised funds, designed, scheduled, managed, and led 40-hour camp, taught 80 participants various STEM skills, invited to direct a camp for the next 2 years. And that actually shows that someone made a difference because these are the specific things they did, very active verbs, and also they were invited to go back again, that people really liked them and wanted them to return. You can see a little bit of a difference of first just showing maybe the position, just the name, versus actually showing what you did and how you were able to convey that impact. Okay, so now that we've talked about academics, the big base, the well-roundedness, then we talked about extracurriculars, kind of a little bit more distinguishing, a little bit more time, and a little bit more choice in that. Finally, we'll talk about character. How can you convey yourself as a person? I'll first talk about interviews, and then I'll talk about letters of recommendation, and probably talk about the essay, which is probably the most important part, where part you get to control. We'll save that for the very end. First, I'll tell a quick story, the difference between accept and reject. So yes, I got into Princeton, but I also got rejected from Penn. I was encouraged by a member of my family, I won't say who, to apply to Penn. And so I was like, okay, well, I really don't want to. And then this member was like, but you should. So I was like, okay, fine. So I drafted an application, and for the life of me, I really could not figure out why do I want to go to Penn. I couldn't answer that question. But I could answer that question for Princeton because I really like their programs, I really like their mission statement, I really like the people that I talked to there. All of these things, but I just didn't fit with Penn. And so I went through the interview, and this person was asking me, so what do you want to major in here? And I was like, oh, actuarial science. And she was like, oh, I don't think we have that major. And I was like, oh, great, okay. So yeah, so I butchered that as well. And then obviously I just like submitted that essay like maybe 10 minutes before it was due. Did not work out, got a rejection list. But it's okay because I think I like this a little bit better anyway. So not salty about that at all. The difference between accept and reject. So how can you not only convey yourself, but also connect that to a college, right? I think keeping in mind when you're thinking about telling your story, we also want to think about why do you even want to apply to this school? Because that's a key component. Speaking of that, going to the interview, know your why, know why you want to be there. Because I guarantee, okay, so first you'll have a college interview, maybe not, depends on what school you apply to, and so alumni will come and talk to you for maybe 30 minutes or so. It's very casual generally, but one question they will definitely ask you is like, why do you want to go to X? And have an answer to that, because that's really helpful. And I didn't really have one for Penn, so. And then second, tell your story, and we'll talk about how we can actually tell the story. So we want to be memorized not as like just a student by the numbers. Remember, we want to be someone who's like actually a person. Okay, and then finally, ask questions, because this is like a conversation. This is a really great chance for you to get to know that school better through someone who got there. And so have questions ready and think of it as a conversation. Actually, like it's really cool to be able to get to talk to someone who's taking like 30 minutes out of their day and who went to a school that you're interested in and to get to know their experience. So I think this is a really important part of asking questions in your interview. Okay, so we've talked about the interview, and I'll talk about letters of rec. Just a few tips thinking about when you're doing letters of recommendation. So first, choose wisely. Okay, I like to think of breadth and depth. So breadth is like a wide variety of people. So I could ask like 2 tennis coaches, but how would that really distinguish me? I feel like they would say the same things, right? If I ask like a tennis coach and a computer science teacher and a history teacher, that gives me a wide breadth, right? Of like a sort of a horizontal span. And then depth is vertical span. So how well do these people know me? If I've only taken a class for 1 semester and I barely talked up in class, I'm probably not going to ask that person for a recommendation because they don't know me that well. So let's say I like met them freshman year and kept up with them sophomore, junior year, and then took a class in into their office hours, let's ask them questions, let's engage in class. That's more the depth that you want, right? So depth, how well do people know you, and breadth, a variety of things. And breadth and depth can also be applied to your extracurriculars or your academics. The breadth is kind of the well-roundedness, and depth is the pointiness. Because I say be polite. It's best not to just be like, oh hey, can you send this, like, can you write this email, this application for me, and then like just send it an email and then like expect me to do it. Because I personally don't like receiving things like that, and I don't think your teachers would either. So what I would recommend is sending them a quick note and saying like, hey, do you mind if I come to your office like, tomorrow at like 3 or something? And then go to the office in person, and if the person asks, I'm applying to these schools, and I would really be honored if you wrote my application, because I feel like I know you very well, and I feel like you know me well, and I would really appreciate this. And in that in-person ask is so much more meaningful than just a quick email that you send. So that's the first part of being polite is asking in person. And then the second part, after they've done it for you, it's really great to write a handwritten thank you note, because that's like a lot of time that they spent, invested in your success, and just to be able to appreciate them for that is something that will is just very meaningful. And the last thing I recommend is just making it easy for your letter recommendation writer. You can send them like a resume sort of things that you've done over school, especially things that they don't know. Like say if they are your tennis coach, maybe they don't know that you're also really involved in volunteering here or doing this there. And so send that, and also you can send your essays as well. And then they'll get an idea of what the rest of your application looks like, and so they can kind of craft their own letter to complement the rest of your application. Okay, so now we've talked about interviews, we've talked about letters of recommendation, and that's all under the character part. And then probably the most important part, the essays, is because this is what you actually have like complete control over. So academics, you have some control over, you can apply yourself, and that's really great. Extracurriculars, you can choose your time, but some things might just not be offered. And then interviews, you've got another person that's also part of the conversation, don't have too much control over. Letters of recommendation, they're the ones writing letters, not you. But essays, like that's all you. This is the time that this is like the pointiest part of that pyramid, very, very pointy. When you think about that pyramid, think about it as like you want to be as tall as possible. So academics will give you some height, extracurriculars some more height, but then your character, your essays, that gives you a lot extra height and a lot of extra pointiness, so you can really like stand out and be like stand out among a sea of applicants. Essays, there's generally two types of essays. The personal growth essay, this is your general like common app essay. Tell us a time when you faced a problem, or like please share an essay of any kind. So you can literally write any story you want. And so I'll talk a little bit about the personal growth essay. This is where you want to show a person, you show who you are as an individual. And the second thing is the why us essay. If you apply to like Penn, for example, they'll be like, why Penn? And here you kind of want to show an academic passion, right? So we've got showing a person and showing a passion. And both of those hinge around a story. So I'll first talk about how we can choose stories in both essays, and then I'll talk about how to just tell a story and sort of an outline that I found helpful that may or may not be helpful for you guys. So 2 essays. Let's start with the first one, conveying a person. Again, the personal growth essay where you can write about anything you want because they give you anything. So how do we take like a random essay prompt, like tell me about a time you faced a challenge and how that grew you? That's like a really big thing, right? What I find helpful is listing first your defining qualities. Like, are you someone who works hard? Are you someone who's kind? Like, write those out first. And then think of times when I X. So let's say you're a hardworking individual. And then you think, okay, well that time when I stayed up for 10 hours, working on this one project because I was really interested in it, and that kind of shows that quality of hardworking. Or let's say you're very kind and you find that quality of yourself. You can write like, someone called me at 4 a.m. because they were in like a car accident or something, and I got up out of bed and I helped them, stayed up until dawn, helping them change their tire or whatever, and then like I went back to school the next day and super tired, but it was worth it. So think of these moments, the time when I and those will support those defining qualities. And this is how you can start to brainstorm ideas for your essay. Because eventually we want to show a defining quality, and then that helps you show you as a person. We want to focus on challenges, flaws, and fears. Why do I say that? Because if you talk about like a great accomplishment, like that time when I won the Boston Marathon, like that's cool, but like it's hard to relate to someone who's super successful because I don't know, not all of us are super successful, but it's very easy to relate to someone who struggled with something and who overcame and who had a flaw or who had a fear, because all of us do, right? Thinking about the times when you were really challenged or you were really scared or you're really like flawed in some way, those are the moments that will be extra relatable and extra memorable. The final piece of advice, in the end when you write it, does it sound like you? Does it have your voice in it? One thing I like to do is read it to a friend and then ask the friend, hey, does this sound like me or does it sound like my mom wrote it? Because you don't want it to sound like that, because I'm sure even if you can't tell, like the college application people will be able to tell since this is what they do for a living, right? Does it sound like you? A couple tips of advice: actually write the essay, like actually be the one writing it, not having like a teacher write it or a parent. Another thing I like to do is when I think of this topic, like, oh, that time when I did something, then I'll just like turn on the voice recorder in my phone and just talk. And that way you can sort of get the story going and have an idea of the things that you want to mention in this. So that's conveying a person, the personal growth essay. You still got the why us essay, the why Princeton, why Penn essay. Conveying a passion. Very similar format, except instead of thinking of defining qualities, we want to think of consuming interest. Like, what are the times when I stayed up, I didn't sleep for the whole day because I was so focused in this hackathon and I really wanted to get this app done and I was just so engaged in it, right? What are those things that really spark your passion and get you in that flow zone? The hook. Something when starting with this hook, this is sort of like your first paragraph, you want to show it, right? So using specific intangible details, what does that mean? Like engaging your five senses. So what did you see? It's like a pretty bad story. Sorry if the first thing you remember is the scent, because it's probably not great. What did you hear? What did you feel? Maybe bits of dialogue that were really memorable to you. Five senses, okay. Generally also you won't really be touching things. You want to make it as visual as possible and as tangible as possible, because this is really what grabs your reader and starts your story. So now that you've gotten the reader hooked, you're going to provide background, right? So now you want to provide context of the bigger story. What is the context of this problem that you've just described? It all started when blank, and then fill in that rest of the sentence. And this is more of like a telling, when before you were showing with all those sensory details, this is more like an explaining a background of how you got here. How did it make you feel? Like, how did it make you feel of the steps leading up to the problem, steps during? This is kind of like the telling part of it. So next is action steps. How did you handle the problem? So now that you've already gotten the people engaged in the problem, provided the background, what did you do next? Did you just sort of sit there and let it happen? You probably did something to fix it. But I talked a little bit about show and tell. Showing, again, specific intangible story details of things that make it so visual and so memorable, right? The senses, the feelings, the dialogue. And then telling is a little bit of more of like abstract reflection, interpretation, or analysis. So things like, oh, like I learned from this, like, or I felt this way. That's not really something that is as tangible and as specific, but it's more like telling. And you kind of want to have a mix of these showing and these telling moments, because that keeps it engaging and keeps it interesting for the reader. Another thing you can do when you can get interesting is to use emotion and to use examples. So for emotion, that's like being vulnerable and being open. The more you can be relatable and be like, I struggle with insecurity, for example. I felt, embarrassed. That's very honest and that's very open, and that keeps it a little bit more engaging. And examples, which I mean by that, this reminded me of a time when I blank. And that keeps it, so when you're in this moment of telling, like, oh, these are the steps I took to cancel the problem, having these little bits of like emotion and of examples, that helps keep it engaging, as well as like fitting in these like show details. Does that make sense, the difference between show and tell a little bit? All right, we've got the problem, we've got background story, so the hook, the background, action steps. What's next? It's lessons learned. What truth did you learn about yourself, others, and life? So what did you take away from this? And some things I like to think about as prompts of starting, of how you might say this, because it's kind of weird to be like, oh, I learned that, it's awkward to stand in front of people and talk. Instead, you can just, these are a little bit more like eloquent ways of showing a lesson learned. So now I believe that, now I think that, when I look back, I began to realize that. So these are like kind of realizations that you come to. This will be another example of telling, right? It's not like a showing detail of like, so I keep referencing these showing and tell, but let's think of specific examples. So if there's a dog, the the way I want to describe the dog as a show is like, the dog has like, really soft fur, it's like brown with like white spots, it wags its tail when I like go feed it, it's like slobbers all over me, and sometimes it like tries to jump on me and I don't like that. So that's kind of the show part. And then the tell part is like, well, the dog makes me feel really happy. I've had this dog for 10 years and it's never failed me. It's like one of my best companions. So that's kind of the difference between show and tell. And in this part of lessons learned, it's more of like a tell time. When I looked back, I realized that my dog was my best friend or something like that. I also don't have a dog, so I'm not sure exactly how that works, but we'll see. Anyway, so, okay, 5, conclusion. You've got your lessons learned, you've got the big problem and how you resolved it. So what, right? What can you take away from this? What does your story say about you? Remember when we talked about those defining qualities or those really consuming interests? This is what you want to convey in your final conclusion, and you don't have to be so specific, like, oh, this story means I love math. Like, it doesn't have to be like that. But if you can get that impression through your essay, that's great. And then you kind of want to bring it to the present. So you've got this big problem, right? So now what's happened? Like, did you just sort of, like, did that affect you in any way? Did it change how you're going to think about the future? Did it change how you're thinking about now? That's sort of the somewhat part of it. As a big summary, telling a story, you've got the hook, what is the immersive scene of the problem, background context, what is the context of the problem, action steps, how did you handle it, lessons learned, what truth did you learn about yourself, others, and life, and finally the conclusion, so what. And okay, so I was really scared that I would have extra time and then I'd have to share my own coming out story, but I do have extra time, so I guess I have to share it. So, and my parents said that it's best if I just talked instead of read it, because I would love to just read it since that's so much easier. But okay, so I'll just go ahead, since I'm pretty much at the end of my slides, I'm just going to go ahead and share my own story of the personal growth one. And then when I do, please do keep in mind these sort of 5 things and listen in and look for them as well. Okay, so it was 1:30 a.m. and I was, my roommate was sleeping. I go to NCSM, so it was boarding school. I had a roommate, she was sleeping, but I was staying up. My eyelids were so heavy, I was going to fall asleep. And what did I have to do? I wasn't watching Netflix or something, that would be great. But I was looking at molecular orbital theory. What is that? I don't even know. But why would I even want to study how these little molecules float around in space? I don't know. But anyway, so I had to do this for some homework assignment for AP Chem. I was looking at the textbook, not helpful. Looking online, not helpful at all. Looking at problems that we've done in the past, that was just gibberish. So super, super fruitless. But this was an average day when I was taking AP Chem because I'm not really inclined towards the sciences. But the thing about going to a school like science and math is that everyone around me was so excellent. So I was in a class with all these people who were acing these tests and raising their hands and spreading out long words that didn't make any sense to me, and I just felt so inferior and so incompetent. Okay, so fast forward, rewind backwards to why I was even there in the first place. So yeah, as I said, I didn't really practice this, so I'm doing it as we speak, first time. I come from China, so my parents were immigrants here, and they came with $1,000 and no English, probably like many of your parents, and I think that's really inspiring. And so I was still in China, and they were working. My dad was a lab researcher, and my mom was a waitress, and they were trying to save every penny they could get to get me here. Oh, the reason I bring this up, now I'm trying to remember, the reason I bring this up is because I didn't realize that my bad experience in chemistry would actually change my relationship with my dad. And so now, going back, pretend like I copy-pasted that section that I just said and inserted it now, because, okay, so anyways, so back to my parents, and I was in China, right? So they saved enough money to bring me over here, and they both had PhDs in chemistry, and I knew only my mom's dialect because I grew up with her parents, and so I wasn't able to communicate with my dad as much, and he also worked a lot of hours in the lab, weekends all the time, really long days, so I felt a little bit more distance from him and didn't really get as much of a relationship. And so, one day going back to chemistry, I went to all the office hours I could. I talked to so many other of my really genius students, and nothing was really helping. So I was at home one day, and I was really struggling over this one thing. My head was in my hands. I was like, oh my goodness, and I felt a hand on my shoulder, and the words do you need help? And my dad, and he sat with me and he explained these concepts, and it made a lot of sense. And sometimes our chemistry sessions would turn into like heart-to-heart conversations where he would talk about his experience in high school and undergrad, where he was number one, and then in graduate student school, he wasn't like the top student anymore, and that came with its own insecurities. And I realized, we're very similar people. We're both aspiring, but we have some insecurity, and that helped me actually accept myself as well. And so, because of our sessions with my dad and I began to do better in chemistry. I managed to eke out like a decent grade, passing grade in it, and I started to actually kind of like it, not to the extent that I want to do it anymore. I specifically chose my major so I wouldn't have to take any more chemistry, but yeah, so through that time I actually got to, even though it was like a really difficult time in my life, I really got to get to know my dad more and to talk to him more, and I couldn't have wanted it any different. Even though I really hated that class, I really appreciated it for that effect. And so that's my story, and I hope you will be able to find some inspiration to tell your own stories. So thank you very much. Okay, don't be shy, because, oh yes. Yeah, that's a really great question. How do I solve a problem when I'm nervous and I'm speaking in front of people? Like right now, for example, super nervous. A couple things that I found helpful. So first was just exposure. I forgot to admit, I have a friend who goes to UNC. Her name is Danielle, and she is like this huge fear of spiders. Like if there's a spider in a room, she would not go into it, right? But at UNC, they had this really cool class that they don't have for Princeton. I wish they did, but it's like or not a class. It's like a free sort of like psych study, and it was specifically to conquer the fear of spiders. So she did this class, right? And so they first started with putting like a simple daddy long legs in a room, and she would sit in the room, and she hated it. But she would sit with the daddy long legs, and eventually, it didn't go and bite her and kill her. So she was like, okay. She was like, okay, I can handle a daddy long leg on a table when I'm sitting there, right? And then they like upgraded the spider, so then it became like a tarantula. Super gross, right? But she eventually got used to that, and so it would sit there, the tarantula was there, she would sit there, totally fine. And then they started upgrading a little bit more. They would put like the daddy long legs on her hand, and then she'd be cringing, but eventually she could relax and sort of sit there with the spider on her hand. And eventually it was like a tarantula on the hand, which is so gross. Like they're like hairy and I don't want to think about it, but she got used to that as well. And then they let the tarantula like crawl up all over her arm, which is I can't believe I'm so impressed that she did this, but she was able to get used to that as well. So it was like little steps like that until she was finally able to be comfortable enough that like if there was a spider in the room, she could go in, put a cup over it, put it outside, no big deal for her. And she went from not even being able to walk in the room to like being able to do that. So I think that sort of exposure of your the growth of your comfort zone until it gets a little bit bigger every time, and then like if you sort of think of that fear, like for her that was a fear of spiders, and I had this like huge fear. I even still have this huge fear of public speaking and talking to people, even strangers, people I don't know. But if I start to think of that maybe not as fear of something to back away from, but instead something to like open up to, like an opportunity to learn, I think that's helpful as well. So exposure, growth of your comfort zone, and then reframing that fear as a way to learn. Oh, thank you. I'm really thank you. Oh, thank you.
So I have a question about like how in high school you have a lot of social studies activities and communities, something. How do you manage your schedule?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is funny because I had this talk as Zhao Yang, right? Okay, I keep calling you Chao Yang, and my parents are like, oh, that's wrong. It's okay, so Zhao Yang. As Zhao Yang said, on Friday I was talking to some UNC freshmen and telling them about time management and about growth mindset and how you grow. And it's funny because I thought this talk would have nothing to do with that, but I'm actually recycling some of the same stories and stuff in there. So I'm really glad that you asked. The question was, how do you manage your time? I think that's a really great question. So I think a big thing about current high school students, a lot of us, is that we're very overscheduled. Like we have 8 hours of class, which is nice. I'm in college now and I only have like 3 hours, and I think that's a lot, but 8 hours is a lot. So you have 8 hours of class and you go directly to your activities, you're able to squeeze dinner in on the car, and then you that's, like, I don't know how you can squeeze out much time outside of that already, but I would try to think about focusing on the things that have the most impact. So what do I mean by that? So there's this idea of like the Pareto principle. I don't know if any of you are part of it, but it's basically saying like 80% of your effort leads to 20% of results, and then 20% of your effort leads to 80% of results. So that could mean like in a paper that you read, 80% of the content is 20% of what is actually the meaning of the paper, and then 20% of the content is 80% of the meaning of the paper. And so when you think about your activities of like, I think some things, I know this sounds really scary, but some things don't have to be done. Or some like, maybe you don't have to like go to this extra like activity that someone said was a really good idea because it might look good on your resume or whatever. I would focus on the things that you truly care about and that you truly want to commit to. And the way you know that, like if you're like about to go somewhere and you like kind of dread that, that's probably not a good feeling, probably not a good use of your time. But if you're really excited about going somewhere and you really want to do more for it and you are really invested in that activity, I think those are the ones you should keep and then spend more time on. So the time that the activities that you can cut, you can use that time to really focus on the things that do matter to you. And I mean, I could go into maybe some more time management little details, but I feel like everyone here is well time managed. But I find it helpful just to try to, I mean, I always procrastinate a lot, so that was a lot of my time in high school was like doing nothing because I was procrastinating. And so I found it helpful to sort of break huge tasks into little bites that even like a friend could complete, for example. Because I tend to overestimate my own abilities, so if I broke it up for myself, it would be like big thing. But if I broke it up for a friend, it's like smaller little tasks that are computable, and that's helpful to sort of overcome that barrier when trying to get started. And I think, I don't know, like this idea of time management is a really good question. I would just say like focusing on activities you really enjoy, and then of the time that you do have, like mitigating procrastination. Yeah.
When you do college visits, what do you think you should look for?
That's a really great question. When you do college visits, what should you look for? So I find it helpful. It's great to walk around. It's great to sort of see the campus and to see the students who might be around there. And I think it's also really helpful to not just go on the floor, but try to actually talk to students or talk to professors who are there. Professors probably more difficult, but if you see random student, just like, hey, I'm a prospective student. And it sounds really weird, but as a student now, I would be so excited to like talk to a high school student and to tell them like how awesome is the school, or like maybe how stressed out I am if you're not getting me on a good day. But like that really would give you an honest perspective. But I do think even if you don't get that opportunity to go and ask students themselves, you can just sort of get a feel for it already by going on the tour and going and visiting campus. And I think it's a really great question because it's important to visit the schools, to have an idea of where you're going to spend the next 4 years, whether you like it or not. So yeah, good question. Yeah. Going. 对，好。Okay, 不错的问题。But my Chinese isn't very good, so I'll respond in English if that's okay. So first question was about NCSSM, insights for there. I think it's actually very similar to the college application process. You know, you've got to submit your transcript, your SAT scores, you've got essays to write. I think you need letters of rec, if I'm not mistaken. So having a very similar mindset, I feel like it really prepares you for college if you've already gone through this process once, of being able to tell a story, of thinking about people you want to ask who know you well. And I know it's a little bit more difficult because you're only in high school for 2 years, so some of the people might not be as close to you as if you have like a traditional 4 years of high school. But having this idea of like being able to convey a story is really helpful for NCSSM as well. And I would say like, don't be discouraged if you don't get it, because that's very up to the numbers of your district and this area, the triangle area. Like I'm from the triad, so fewer smart people, and it's a little bit easier. Like so triangle is a little bit more competitive, and they only take like a certain number from each county because they're really into like that whole diversity thing. So yeah, don't be discouraged if you don't get it, because you can do really well in your home high school, especially if they're really great high school students. Okay, and then the second question was Oh, Princeton, right. Why did I choose Princeton? That's a good question. Okay, so the surface answer, I visited, and I was doing this tour of all the high schools in the Northeast, all the IITs, Yale, Harvard, MIT, Princeton, and each high school I went to at that time, I, just grew up in Greensboro, didn't really see many homeless people, I'm gonna be honest. So when I went to Yale, there was a homeless person in New Haven, and I was so scared. I was like, I'm not going here. When I went to MIT, Harvard, there were homeless people in the street, and I was so scared because I just had this irrational fear of homeless people, of like people who and so then I went to Columbia. It was New York. It's dirty. It's like unclean. I was like, no. But Princeton, it was sunny. It was beautiful, and the security person said, oh, our last incident was this raccoon. We didn't even know if the raccoon had rabies or not, so we had to call all the security forces to get this raccoon and hide it. And I was like, oh, this is where I want to be, right? Raccoons, yes, I can handle that. Since then, I've been to New York a lot, and I'm ashamed to say that I was scared of most people, and I started to treat them more as humans instead of as something different. But regardless, that's the surface answer of why I wanted to go to Princeton. The second thing I wanted was, I really loved their undergraduate focus. They're one of the only schools that has a larger number of undergraduates than graduates, and I think that really comes out in the way that teachers treat their students, the way that they have time for them, and things like that. And then third is their well-rounded education. So they really focused on having a liberal arts education, yet being a research university. And at the time, I was still really interested in computer science and wanting to do that, but I sort of realized, I actually really like art, and I really like music, and I really like all these other things, and I don't want to be in a class where my an art major with no differential equations. So I feel like that's just kind of an incongruency, right? I want to be in a place where people might not know all of calculus, and that's cool because then we've got a diversity of thought because we're really focused on well-rounded education. So those three things: raccoons, undergraduate focus, and well-rounded education were where I really was drawn to this. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
I was wondering, how do you volunteer hours? Yeah. Because you are really having already and
Right.
Right. So wondering, how is volunteer being focused?
Yeah, that's a really good question. How do you choose volunteer hours because you're spending so much time doing it? And I think it's a great question because it falls in the extracurricular activity where you can choose what you do with your time. And so I would say to think about the things where you care about the most. So, like you said, if you're somebody like swimming, you want to help maybe people who can't swim as well and teach them, for example, disabled people or something. I don't really know how swimming works, or things like that where it focuses around central passions. And that's not just out of interest, so you actually enjoy what you volunteer to do. You don't want to stock shelves in a library just because it looks good, right? You want to actually try to create those opportunities for yourself where you can do something that means something to you. So I would maybe think about current activities that you do or current academic interests that you have, and then try to make volunteer activities around that. So maybe things don't exist, so you can contact maybe a local YMCA or a local something and say, is there any way I can help and do this because I'm very interested in swimming and I'm very interested in helping other people swim. And so that's the first thing. And then the second thing I'd say is, I actually don't have a second thing to say, so that's all. Yeah.
How many universities did you apply?
Oh, that's a great question. How many universities did I apply for? So I applied for 8, including Penn, and I like to erase Penn from my mind because it was, I say it's not from my own volition, but maybe if I had gotten in, I would say, oh, I wanted to go, right? So anyways, so 8 including Penn, and so, okay, I actually forgot to mention a lot of this. So remember when I talked about the difference between accept and reject, why I got into Princeton, why I didn't get to Penn, but I actually had a reason why I wanted to go to Princeton, and for Penn it was it's a cool name. So there's going to be a relatively smaller list of schools in which you can really articulate that because it takes time, it takes asking people living in colleges or looking up their programs or trying to figure out how your interest and passion lines up to that school's mission. It takes a lot of that to be able to say, okay, I really want to go to this school. So it's going to be a smaller list. Second thing I would say of those smaller lists, I'd say maybe 8 to 12 is ideal. Second reason for that is because you're going to have 8 to 12 why this college essays, And yes, you can recycle a lot of content, but it helps. Like the more specific and the more customized you can get it, the more that school's gonna be flattered, frankly. And the more flattered they are, the more likely you can get in. And so that's helpful. And so another thing I forgot to mention is when you're applying to this. Oh,谢谢。我很 appreciate that。我很感谢。
我们都谢谢 Annie 哈。一杯凉水。谢谢。这是今天下午我们在这里讲的一杯凉水啊。那特别感谢咱们